Hello and welcome everybody. We'll be with you in a few moments while we wait a couple minutes here for everybody else to join us. Hope everyone's doing well and enjoying the week so far. We'll get started here momentarily. Feel free to take the next minute to go grab your next cup of coffee for the morning.
Too late for that.
Want to give it another minute, Jason?
Yeah, let's do another minute.
Is that one of our attendees that's barking like that?
Yeah, I mean, the dog knew that we were going to do a presentation about working from home, and he just said, "You know what? I didn't let people know the real issues that happen when we work from home." So.
Exactly.
He is going to participate. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started if you're all right with that, Jason and Rob.
Yes, please.
Great. Well, hello and welcome everyone. We thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Kevin Baylor, CTO and Managing Partner of Alliance IT, based here in Sarasota, Florida. I'm enjoying my 30th year in information technology, with about 2/3 of those involved in and around the manufacturing environment. So, Alliance IT, we're an innovative and leading provider of VoIP and IT solutions for small to mid-sized businesses. And today we're going to be presenting and talking about managing a remote workforce and preparing to return to the office. So, just a little housekeeping before we get started here. Feel free to use the Q&A session for any questions you have, or as we go along, feel free to pop up and raise a hand, and if we need to expand on a question, let us know at that time. You don't have to hold it until the end if you don't want. So, before we get started, though, I would like to turn it over to Rob Harris, Executive Director of SAMA, for a little intro about SAMA. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. I definitely see some names of people that I know, so happy to see that you're on the call today in the conference. I am the Executive Director of SAMA. For those of you that are unaware of who SAMA is, we are the Sarasota Manatee Area Manufacturers Association. I want to thank Kevin and Alliance IT, who is a silver partner member of ours, and I want to thank Jason Price from Datto for presenting today. SAMA is the Regional Manufacturing Association for Sarasota and Manatee counties. There are 12 RMAs around the state, which fall under the Florida Makes umbrella. Between SAMA and Florida Makes, our goal is to provide resources needed by manufacturers through networking among members and a network of third-party providers. SAMA is your hub, your center point of contact for whatever is holding back growth, efficiency, or profitability within your manufacturing company. SAMA focuses on workforce development, government advocacy, networking, supply chain optimization, and education, such as this webinar today. And you can get more information about SAMA on our website, sama-fl.com. And I'll turn it back to you, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, excellent, Rob. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do with SAMA as well in the local manufacturing community. It's definitely a huge undertaking, and this region needs it. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, thank you.
So without further ado, I do want to turn it over to Jason Price, the Channel Development Manager with Datto. We've had a long-term relationship with Datto as a Blue partner, and greatly appreciate Jason's time with us today. Jason.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so Jason Price, Technical Channel Development Manager at Datto. Typically, my role is actually traveling around the country and doing these presentations in person, but sadly, I was affected by this as well, and so I resort to doing these presentations from my man cave now. So, it's affected us all. So, who is Datto? What are we? Datto is this IT provider of solutions to MSP providers. We were founded in 2007. We have over 23 global offices. We have over 600,000 small and medium-sized businesses being protected by our solutions. And we have a little bit over 1,700 employees and continuing to grow. What we offer, we have a ton of different products that help our MSP partners and our IT service provider partners to be able to provide solutions that help you protect your environments as a small and medium-sized business. I'm not going to be talking about products and things of that nature today. This is going to be more of a conversation around, once again, managing a remote workforce and returning to the office post-COVID. So managing your remote workforce, a little bit over a year ago, pretty much all of our lives have changed. When we pretty much first entered the first, stages of the pandemic, and with that, a lot of pivoting had to happen in order to keep businesses up and running while making sure that we protect our workers and our, colleagues. And so, it's something where, we never had to deal with this, but luckily we had technology in place that allowed us to really prevail and really be able to do really good things, even through this trying circumstance. There's a ton of different surveys out there, and a good amount of CEOs feel that, work from home is sort of here to stay in some way or another, one form or another. All right. The majority are saying that, it can be a hybrid model where, some people are working from home, some people are working from the office, but, on some level, it is here. And believe it or not, a lot of people, had this assumption that working from home was going to be less productive and really going to hurt the business. However, we're seeing that there's actually a huge amount of productivity that is achieved from working from home, right? So it's not a doomsday scenario where you are stuck working from home. You have the opportunity to actually be more profitable if done correctly, right? So there are some common challenges of working remotely. So one would be obviously lack of face-to-face supervision, right? So this isn't from a management standpoint looking down and saying I should be supervising this person or this team or whatever, but also, what that employee is craving, right? So a lot of times an employee needs that supervision. They require that supervision, right? If they don't get that supervision, maybe they just don't work in the same manner that they should. And it's not because they're trying to take advantage of the situation, but some people just need a little bit more face-to-face coaching, right? There's lack of access to information, right? We all have that person in the office. That's the go-to person, right? You can ask them any question and they're going to direct you where to go, who to talk to, and you're able to get things accomplished in that way. And working from home kind of changed that, right? Now you have to think of different ways to talk to that person, right? Or interact with that person, right? And it's typically just not the same feeling. Social isolation. Some people looked at work as an escape from home, right? They're able to leave the problems that maybe they're dealing with at home. They leave for 8 hours and interact with people at work, have water cooler talk, drink, go out for coffee, go out for lunch, and that is gone, right? And that definitely did affect some people in varying ways. Ton of distractions. I don't know if you heard earlier, my dog decided to start barking as soon as this webinar came on. And it's just what happens, right? The mailman's going to come at least 2 or 3 times for some reason. Anytime I'm on a call, somebody's going to be selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever the case may be, but there's so much more distractions working from home, right? If you have kids, if you have a spouse who are also schooling from home or working from home, right, that can get even more chaotic, right? How are you hiring, or how are you managing your new hires, right? So business never stopped, right? For the most part, business has increased in most verticals. And with that, you need to have more people to work, right? And so you hire people, but how are they picking up on the different processes that you have in place? How are they picking up on the culture? How are they actually learning and accelerating during this time? And then living spaces. I mean, ideally, everybody has their own space where they can work. But if you're a small family and you have an apartment with just 2 bedrooms, maybe that is a struggle, right? And maybe that's something that would be a challenge for you to really be able to do a great job working from home, right? And so when we start taking a look at how managers can help support remote employees, there are a couple of things that are proven to really work, right? So first and foremost, making sure that there is a structured either daily check-in or daily conversation that happens, right? It should be on purpose, it should be on point, it should be planned, it should be scheduled out, right? That can be the beginning of the day, that could be to close the day and prepare for the next day. Whatever the case may be, people crave structure, and this right here is a great way of giving that structure, having consistency in terms of reaching out, but not having the feeling as if somebody's being micromanaged or untrusted. You're able to also provide several different communication technology options, right? So there's different ways that you're able to communicate with your team. That can be through Teams, that can be through Slack, that can be through email, right? And it's important to have these technologies, but also find a way to be able to have rules of engagement in terms of how to utilize these different platforms, right? Are you going to send an email's worth of information via Slack? No, that's not necessarily the most productive way to execute, right? But maybe if you have a quick, hey, can you check this for me, or hey, can you check that for me? Maybe Slack is the best route to go, right? We need to make sure that we're offering encouragement and emotional support. Once again, we don't know what is happening in people's lives, and we have to be understanding to that. Yes, the work needs to get done. Yes, we still are, under the thumb to make sure we hit certain metrics and KPIs. But at the end of the day, the circumstances that everybody's dealing with is so different that we have to be sensitive to that. And then we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for social interaction. I don't know, Kevin or Rob, what have you guys been doing in terms of making sure that you have that social interaction with your organizations?
Yeah, Jason, I completely agree with all those points. I mean, it's definitely key to still have that structure. Remote work, there's going to be flexibility. There's going to things, happen, especially those that have kids and, are doing the e-learning. You got to go and stop and help them. But, just if you've got a large team, breaking them up into small teams and having that little 5-minute huddle, maybe it's not a stand-up meeting anymore, or maybe you're actually standing up and still on the webcam. But just getting that structured meeting, that structured check-in, allowing for that social interaction with the teams, whether it's, department-based, accounting, or project managers getting together and having a quick little huddle. I've seen where, you take 5 minutes on a Tuesday, you get past the Monday and you take 5 minutes on that Tuesday and say, hey, how was your weekend? What's going on? What's coming up? Just break away from, the cubicle, home cubicle for a minute and get back to that 5-minute water cooler talk, just to make everyone feel like they're still a part of the team. They're still there. there's value,
Mhm.
in
That's
working with the
normalcy.
company. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've seen and have had discussions with some of our local manufacturers that are continuing with remote workforce and actually encouraging it, they are having in-person meetings on Monday mornings, and they're requiring, now this is for people that have all their staff here locally, but they are requiring people to come to the office. It could be out on the production floor in a large open space, where people can still social distance. But it is a way to get face-to-face, even if it's just once a week. Another thing that I've heard is some of the companies that have traditionally had half-hour lunch sessions, they're expanding that to 1 hour lunch, and they're encouraging their employees that work remotely to get together for lunch and don't feel pressured to get back in 30 minutes. If you run a little late, that's okay too. It comes back to that trust factor that you talked about earlier. So, I think as time goes on, as people get vaccinated, masks, regulations are being lifted and people want to get back together, I think those are the creative kind of things that you'll start to see more companies implement.
Absolutely, right? We want that normalcy, right? We want to replicate, the experiences you had in the office, right, or outside the office, right? At my company, we'd have like, a bi-monthly or bi-monthly happy hour, right? We'd go to a local bar, we'd get a couple of drinks, and it's also a pretty awesome experience. And so one of the things that we did is we started doing happy hours where we did trivia, right? And the trivia a lot of times was about each person on my team, right? So I was able to learn more about my teammates during this pandemic than I had 7 years prior working on the same team with them, right? So, with that, it actually has built a lot more camaraderie. It's pretty cool getting to really and truly understand and know and appreciate your coworkers, right? And we've seen different methods of this happening, right? We've seen people doing, wear your favorite hat day, to a webinar, or we've seen yoga or talent shows and things of that nature all happening via Zoom, right? So it's pretty awesome how you can still, maintain and foster that social interaction, even though you can't necessarily be right next to somebody or in the same room as somebody.
Yep.
And Jason, I have a question going back to one of the points you brought up earlier about communication and the different methods.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a suggestion or a recommendation on the quantity of methods? And what I mean by that, I have felt this firsthand, and I've talked with others. When you're dealing with email, text messages through Teams, trying to communicate through Yammer. There seems to be some people out there that want to implement technology for the sake of technology, and it's very difficult to manage all of that. So in a month from now, when I remember a conversation from somebody, it's very difficult to figure out where that written conversation was, because I have to check so many different locations. Mm-hmm. Is there a recommendation on that? Don't go above X?
I would go above 3. Typically, you have your short communication, which is going to be like via Slack, to get quick messages, back and forth. A lot of times, those are going to be timely. Email is going to be typically more in depth. I will Slack someone and say, hey, I just sent you an email, right? Because people may not necessarily be in their inbox all the time, but they're always on their Slack. And so I would utilize it for those quick communications. But I prefer to just get on a quick call with somebody. Like that's like my preference. And that way, there's less that can be interpreted incorrectly, right? And so those are the 3 methods that I would prefer. So it doesn't necessarily need to be Slack or Teams, whatever, but one instant messaging kind of platform, one email platform, and then, the ability to actually reach out and actually speak to somebody. And I think going above that is kind of redundant. And I go through the same thing where somebody said, you didn't get my message. And I'm looking through like 4 different platforms. I'm like, what message are you talking about? And then I finally realized that it's into the one I really overchecked. So I would say 3 would be the most that I would implement.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Anytime. So we talked about, keeping things normal as possible, with team huddles and one-on-ones and things of that nature. The next 2 points, right? So first is like, use video to get that face-to-face interaction, and it makes it seem closer. And the point number 3 sounds like, counterintuitive, right? Not use video. The thing is, at this point, people are kind of tired of being on video all the time, right? There's some people who do better being able to have a conversation, and they're moving around, right? They're walking through their house, they're pacing back and forth. And so we have to realize that, maybe when somebody doesn't have their video on, it's not a slight to anybody. It's not that they're, doing something, nefarious or something they shouldn't be doing on the company hours, but, you don't necessarily need to be on video all the time. If it's a quick, catch up, maybe not a video, but if it's a team meeting, maybe you want to make sure everybody's attentive and, is paying attention and, is engaged in the conversation. And at that point, maybe utilize the video functionality, right? So we've been almost programmed to think that anytime we're on a Zoom, we have to be on video, which I don't think that's necessarily a necessity. And be a little bit more flexible. Once again, people are home. They have kids, they have babies. It's, there's so much things going on. So just make sure that you're understanding of that and not trying to necessarily hold them to the same exact standard that you may have held them to when they were in the office. We also want to make sure that, along with managing the remote workforce, you need to be aware of the threats, right? So this is something that is scary, right? Because in the first couple months after, the pandemic first started, there was a 5-fold increase in cyber attacks, right? Why? More people are working from home. When you're working from home, a lot more things are able to kind of get through the networks, and people aren't may not be as vigilant, or people may be once again distracted, and they're trying to balance both their careers and their work and their job and those duties, but also the things that are going on within their homes. So there are a couple of things that will help with managing the workforce security aspect. One is to alert employees and customers to expect an increase in phishing attempts. So phishing, for those who aren't familiar, is the ability to send somebody a misleading email, right? You get an email, you think it's from FedEx because you're expecting a whole bunch of items that you just bought over the last couple months because you're home and you can't but to go shopping, and you see a tracking number and you think that, hey, I can see if my item is coming in. You click that tracking number, and unfortunately you've been phished, right? So there's different ways that these criminals are getting innovative in order to make sure that they're getting your data. Implement multi-factor on all VPN connections, right? So a lot of times if you're working from home, you pretty much, in order to get access to that network of your company's network, you should have a VPN, right? And that VPN is essentially a tunnel that allows you to onto that networks or onto that premise. And if you don't have multi-factor authentication on it, you risk the fact or risk you risk the ability to have these bad actors be able to log into your company's network and steal information. Making sure that you have things like, network firewalls in your network, right? Making sure that, yes, you are home, you are working, you probably have the optimum router or the cable provided router or something of that nature. But what are the security configurations of it, right? You have to remember that, if it's your company, a lot of privileged information is going over that network. And you want to make sure that, the router that they got from Best Buy or Staples is going to be up to snuff to make sure that it's able to accommodate your security needs for your company. Establish clear communication policy for employees, right? So things are going to happen. Like, what happens if somebody gets ransomware on their company computer, right? Are they ashamed and they're going to try to hide it? Or are they going to say, hey, Bob, John, this is, I just clicked this. I now have ransomware on my computer. Tell me what I need to do, right? And that's going to be the best way to do it, because you can kind of get ahead of the attack, as opposed to it just festering and spreading throughout the company network. Secure your home workstations. So make sure that you have antivirus on it, and make sure you have all the anti-malware software is up to date. make sure that as you walk away from your computer, that your kids aren't using your computer to, download free video games. And next thing you know, you have all these pop-ups and malware and things of that nature on your computer. And then make sure you're backing up that data. There seems to be some sort of disconnect that, as people are working from home, there isn't the same need to back up that data because, the servers are in the office. No, if they're working from home, if they're generating new data, you need to make sure that that's being backed up as well. So
and
coronavirus.
Jason,
oh yeah.
So a question relating to VPN came through the Q&A.
Yep.
So I think it was a good time for it. Are there any minimum standards for home internet speed when you are using VPN connections?
That might be a better question for Kevin. I typically say no unless you're doing sometimes if you're doing like site to site backups, things of that nature, you want to have a specific like 50 megabytes per second or something of that nature. But for regular run of the mill stuff, Kevin, I'm relying on you for this one.
Yeah, that's a little open-ended question. Kind of a off-the-shelf answer would be, as much as you could afford. Your single individual that's working from home isn't going to require as much as, two parents with 5 kids doing e-learning. The more you've got going on, the more the bandwidth, the better. A lot, again, depending on the regions and the areas. I mean, a lot of the home internet speeds, kind of the minimum is 75 or 100 meg down. And some of it has asynchronous and some are synchronous speeds. You always want to be conscious of your upload speed. A 2 or 5 meg upload's probably not going to do well if you've got to do multiple sessions. So it's really looking at what your local providers can have. If you can get a 75 or 100 meg down and 15 to 25 up, I would say that's a minimum. I know there are areas that that may be a challenge. And you've really got to deal with the best you can.
I am so happy that you're on this call with me today because that was a beautiful answer. And so awesome. So hopefully that answered your question. And so, yeah, coronavirus really set the stage for, a ton of hacking, and phishing and things of that nature. And you have to remember that people always have this misconception of what a hacker is or who they are or what they do. And, most of the time, you see these pictures and they're in a dark basement with a hood over their head and, their face is slightly illuminated. And that's not the case. It's happening from nation states. It's happening from your North Koreas and your Ukraines and your Russias and things of that nature. And they have whole factories set up of people who just come in, punch a clock, and they do nothing but hack. And with people working from home, with people not having the same levels of securities that they normally would have within their office setting, we've made it a lot easier for these bad actors to really cause a lot of harm. There was like a 400 and something % increase in cyber attacks in the medical vertical, and we're like, why would that be? And we have to start thinking, right? Everybody's looking up what COVID is. They're looking up the new numbers. They're looking up new statistics. They're, it's the number one buzzword, right? So they can put a lot more if fake information out there that allows you to click certain stuff, and the next thing you know, you're infected. When it comes to hospitals, right? If you're a hospital or a medical facility and you get ransomware, and you're dealing with congestion because you have people who don't have rooms and this is crazy. Are you going to try to figure it out, or are you just going to pay the ransom? Right? You just pay the ransom and hopefully you get your data back so you can continue having your business run and you can help people. And so the criminals know that, and that's why there's such a surge in the amount of people within the medical vertical that have been affected. All right, so that was working from home. We're going to talk quickly just about returning to the office and the different things that you need to make sure that you're prepared for. So number one, so your people, right? So the first thing is, having that conversation and being open and transparent with them about what the steps you are utilizing in order to protect them, right? You're going to talk about, what type of schedule the return to office is going to be. And is it going to be that you're going back to work once a week? and it ramps up to 4 or 5 days, every other day. You need to have the conversation around, did you have conversations with your local health officials, right? Are you consulting with them, or are you utilizing the best practices to make sure that everybody at the office is going to be safe? The office space, right? So now you have the physical space where the people go to, right? Are you going to be following any sort of guidelines in terms of like your social distance guidelines? What is it? What is the policy for group meetings now? Right? Are you going to have to be outside for these group meetings, right? Where you could be in closer proximity because the virus isn't spread as much. What about visitors? Right? You're a company, you're finally back in the office, you have a pretty neat office where you can close a lot of deals. You have people that you want to invite over and sit down and close deals. Like, how does that work now? Right? Can a prospect come over and take that next step? What about a reclosure plan? Right. So luckily, we've been doing really, really good in terms of vaccinations throughout the United States. And we seem to have, really turned a corner. But what if something happens where we have to close again? Right? How does it look
Don't
like?
even say that.
Right? Hopefully not. We did such a great job overall, right? And a lot of it has been done, has been due to having your IT professionals and MSPs really being able to kind of just jump in and say, okay, you have 20 people, we need to get 20 licenses of this, we need to make sure we get a firewall for these people, we need to make sure that we get notebook computers for these people, we need to make sure we set up images and the other. And that was able to happen like on the fly, right? And that was without a lot of planning or disaster recovery plans that were pre-set up. Like, where do we go from here to make sure that if anything similar to this happens again, God forbid, that we are in a place that we can succeed, right? We talk about technology, right? So, we talked about, when the pandemic hit, we started purchasing all these different technologies in order to make sure that we were able to communicate or over communicate, right? 5 different ways to message somebody. And so now we have to take a look and look at all the technology we deployed, right? And we have to evaluate, hey, is this still do we still have a need for this? Is there still a use for this, right? We have all these people who brought their computers back in from home, right? How are we going to make sure that they're not bringing, some bad, nasty stuff onto our network, right? How are we doing those security audits, right? How are we doing, gap analysis, right? We, with me, when I started working from home, they sent me a keyboard, they sent me 2 monitors, they sent me all this great stuff in order for me to function and do my duties. But how are we managing those assets, right? How are we inventorying them, right? How are we making sure that those are going to be losses for the company? Are they going to stay home? The company that the employee leaves and all of a sudden he has $400 or $500 worth of equipment at home, right? So those are the things that we need to make sure that we're doing from a technology standpoint. And then business continuity and disaster recovery planning. I kind of touched on this a moment ago, but did you have a disaster recovery plan before? And if you did it help you out in that situation, right? If you didn't, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to say, hey, let's come up with a plan, but the plan isn't going to be what it traditionally is about, right? Because we usually talk about fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and things of that nature, what to do in those type of situations, right? But now we need to start thinking, okay, what if another pandemic hits? What if, a situation happens where, we get ransomware? What happens if this happens or that happens? And come with all these different, worst case scenarios and have a plan around it, right? The worst thing is not the actual event. The worst thing is not having a plan for the event, right? And so just making sure that is top of mind and that we're actively, creating those plans, but not only create them, because a lot of times they're created, but they're put into a drawer somewhere, right? And you pull it out a year later when you need to use it, or 2 years later, and you're not even using half the solutions anymore that you had in that plan. The person who controlled this part of the plan, stopped working for the company 7 months ago, right? So it needs to be a living and breathing document that is always being updated, and that it's being well communicated out to everybody. And as things change within the organization, that document needs to change as well. And then your customers, right? So now that your people are safe, your offices are set up, your technology is in order, it's about your customers now, right? And so first you need to communicate everything with your customers, right? Hey, I'm sorry. I know we shut down the phone lines for the last year, and everything was being done through email. And I know it sucked, and I do apologize about that, but we are back now. You can communicate with us the normal way, and let's move on to the future. Right? Is there new SLAs in terms of problem resolution? Right? Before, it was 2 weeks to get a problem resolved. That was during the pandemic, and they understood that. Now let's revisit this and say, okay, so our SLA, we're back to being 24 hours or within 3 days for problem resolution. And then a lot has changed, right, in terms of service delivery, whether it be services, whether it be goods, right? Where before maybe you allow people to come to the office and pick up, items, right? Now with COVID, maybe it's not that process anymore. Maybe it's like, hey, we have to leave it outside for you to come pick it up. Or, maybe now, we're offering free delivery, so you don't have to come inside and, risk our employees, or we don't have to risk you or your employees or something of that nature, right? So those are the things that need to come into play. And so to kind of close, I want to talk about a couple of things, regardless if you're working from home, regardless if you're going back to the office, that just need to be acknowledged. And if you acknowledge and live through these next couple points, you will significantly reduce the amount of risk that you in your business have, right? So first off, you want to assess and understand your business risk, and you never ever want to say it won't happen to me, because I guarantee you it'll probably happen to you, right? So the thing is, this idea of cybersecurity, and with cybersecurity is that we do everything to make sure that you don't get, attacked, or you don't lose information or sensitive information, or whatever the case may be. But the thing is, the chance of you getting attacked is so great. It's more so about cyber resiliency. And with cyber resiliency is, if I do get attacked, or when I get attacked, how fast can I bounce back? How fast can it be a blip that happened and it's I'm not having any financial difficulties because of it. I don't have to close my business because of it. My customers are still my customers because of it. Cyber resilience is what we need to start having a conversation around. Making sure that you have policies and procedures, and they're written, and that they're communicated out. Make sure there's ongoing employee training. A lot of breaches and things that happen are caused by human error. It's caused by somebody clicking something they shouldn't have clicked on, which could have all been solved if you were regularly having trainings to show people what they need to look out for. Create and enforce strong passwords, and you probably should be using some sort of password management tool. A couple interesting things. The number one password found in data dumps in 2019 was 123456. The number just spelled 123456. The number fourth password was the actual word password. It's crazy, but it's to the point where, not only are they doing that on your critical systems, right, or their critical systems, they're also doing it on your critical systems. So if I can guess your easy password, guess what? I could use that for your work password too, and now I have $1 million worth of information, right? Never leave devices unattended. I can't tell you how many times I go to the dentist office or to the doctor, and you have the receptionist up front, and she goes back to talk to the doctor or ask the doctor a question. I'm looking over and seeing all this privileged information right there, right? Make sure if you get up, you always lock your computers. Use multi-factor authentication, preferably app-based multi-factor authentication. It is annoying to have another step when you want to get into an application or a program or something of that nature. However, the extra 3 or 4 or 5 seconds can save your business from going out of business, right? Just something so small as that can save your company. And I don't want to sound like I'm, over dramatic or anything of that nature, but you have to realize that if there is a breach, if you lose your data, about 80% of businesses never recover, and they're out of business within a year, right? So it is something that we need to make sure that you guys are 100% vigilant on. Once again, this is whether they're working from home or they're returning to the office.
Right. Hey, Jason, real quick, can you back up
Oh, yeah.
2 slides. Oop, I think that was the one that Sylvia was looking for. Yep, yeah, that was the one. And this presentation deck also will be available afterwards as well. I'll have it available, and Rob will have it available as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because this is stuff we want you to share with people as well, right? Your circle, your employees, everybody should be well aware of the things, the simple, relatively simple steps that you can take in order to better safeguard your business.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So make sure you have a backup solution, right? Part of Datto is that we offer a backup solution. And I'm not saying, hey, you need to go get yourself a Datto. I don't care what you get. You need to make sure you're protecting your data, because your data essentially is your business. And if it's gone one day, you have to think about what's the next step that you're going to do, right? I do think Datto is the best backup solution out there. Little plug. However, it's not a Datto pitch session. It's making sure that you're backing up all your critical systems, right? We want to make sure that you're limiting employee access, and that can be based off of roles. Like the person who is responsible for inventory, maybe they shouldn't have access to the accounting software, right? And vice versa, right? Making sure that you don't just have everybody who has equal credentials will minimize the event, or minimize the chances of there being an event where your data is taken or your systems are breached. Mobile device policy. More and more people are utilizing their own tablets or their own phones, right, to conduct business. And just think about you being out at the supermarket or the grocery store, and you get work emails and you're trying to answer it while you're in line, and all of a sudden you get something that is a phishing scam, and because it's on your phone, you're not even thinking about it, you click on it, and next thing you know, your company has been breached, right? Or all the sensitive information you have about your company that you keep on your phone and in your email, and you don't have a good password to protect your phone, and therefore if somebody is walking and they pick up your phone that you dropped, they now know every detail about your company, right? And that's a scary situation to be in. And once again, establish an incident response plan or disaster recovery plan, whatever you want to call it. Make sure that that is created and that is easily accessible to anybody. You do all these things and you are headed in the right way. I'd like to thank you, and I want to pass it back over to Kevin, and thank you guys for having me today. This has been awesome, and I love the engagement. I love the questions that we've been getting in, and if there's any more questions, please definitely put them in.
Yeah, Jason, there is another question. You want to expand upon and talk about the 3-2-1 backup rule?
Let's go back. So the 3-2-1 backup rule.
Yeah.
In what context are we talking about? The redundancy capability?
Yeah, I think what they're asking is really, kind of the buzz that out there they've heard is this 3-2-1 rule, where you have, really 3 different backups on 2 different media types and one of them offsite.
So a lot of times that isn't the ideal way to go, because it usually requires some human intervention, unless it's like a completely automated process. For instance, what we do at Datto and how we're able to make sure that we secure your complete network and infrastructure is that we take a backup of your system locally on premise, right? So that data lives there. It's immutable, so it can't be touched, it can't be altered, it can't get ransomware. What we're also doing is we're taking that data, we're sending it to our primary data center. Our primary data center is located in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It resides there, but we take it a step further. We then take that data and we send it to our secondary data center, which is across the country in Salt Lake City. And so therefore, this process all happens automatically. You don't have to rely on somebody going in, doing the backup, leaving off premise with a hard drive or something of that nature. And you're guaranteed to have your data living in at least, 3 locations. If you include the actual server or the actual device that's being backed up, it's a total of 4 locations that that data is being preserved in. All of this is happening. All of it's being tested automatically as well. So when we start talking about backups, right? A backup is good, but you have to make sure that that backup is working before you need the backup. The worst thing in the world is to go to use a backup and the backup is corrupted or not working or something of that nature. And so one of the things that we do is that we test every single backup to make sure that it is bootable, to make sure that in the event of a disaster, not only can you get that data if you need it, but we can give you the ability to actually virtualize and take that data and be able to get up and running within minutes or hours, as opposed to having to go find who has the hard drive, or how am I going to download this from here to here and go through all those questions in your head. This is nice, simple, easy to deploy and to utilize.
Well, and,
Sorry if I
and
ran
that's
off.
a well, and that's a good segue to a question that I have is, with more and more smaller and mid-sized companies going towards, Office 365, where emails are now off-site. A lot of people using OneDrive as an instantaneous sync of data. For both of you, really, what is your opinion of essentially eliminating hardware within a business and going 100% cloud-based?
So first and foremost, I'll jump in and talk about like Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace or Workspace, I think it's called now. With those, there is the ability to have those, and it's in the cloud, and you don't have to manage the hardware for those items. However, they still are vulnerable, just as a physical machine. So you can still get a ransomware infection within that set of data. If you have ransomware on your machine, and you have that sync happening with OneDrive, that you can sync that ransomware into that environment and therefore infect that environment. And so there's different solutions that are able to back up those instances. We actually have one at Datto, which is called our Datto SaaS protection. So we're making sure that all of that data is backed up, it's secured in our own private data center. And if there's any situation where your systems go down, or Microsoft system goes down, which it actually has gone down several times over the last couple of months, you're able to actually get that data, which once again, we've backed up into our own data center. One of the common misconceptions about Microsoft and Google is that they're responsible for your data. No, they're responsible for the infrastructure in which your data resides in. Your data is your own responsibility. So if there's like a power outage, if there's a hardware update or a crash machine, they repair those situations. However, that data that resides there is not their responsibility, essentially. So you have to be very careful, because you still need to make sure that you're protecting that data. And if you have a situation where you all of your Microsoft 365 or Google Workplace is in those respective clouds, there's still oftentimes where you're still going to need on-premise hardware. And even if you go to the cloud and utilize like Azure or something of that nature, there's still going to be a need to make sure that that data is backed up as well. So there are solutions available to make sure that that data is still being protected. So it doesn't matter where the data is. All it matters is that there still needs to be several layers of protection to make sure that if anything happens to that data, it can be restored or accessed or recovered in a relatively quick amount of time.
Yeah, and Rob, moving hardware off-prem can definitely be successful for a business. It really is going to depend on that business, whether they can do that effectively or not. We've seen it happen with small and mid-sized businesses. It doesn't matter the market segment, or the size of the business. It really just kind of depends on the business itself, whether getting rid of all the on-prem and somebody going fully remote is going to make that business successful. And real quick, kind of touching on what Jason talked there about backups, that plays back into that whole business continuity and disaster recovery planning. That plan is not something that can just sit on the shelf and go away. I mean, it has to change. If your technology changes from on-premise to cloud to hybrid, that has to change. Full on-prem workforce to remote workforce to hybrid workforce, that plan has to change. And that plan also has to be tested. So, part of that is testing, your backups and making sure they're good. But you really need to look at a business continuity disaster recovery planning and test all aspects of it, from employee communication to, workforce to clients, everything. It's not something that can just easily sit on the shelf.
Absolutely.
And Sylvia's got a question here for you too, Rob. Really looking for suggestions on COVID protocols and social distancing in factory settings, potentially with or without a limited space.
Yeah, so it still seems to be sporadic based on the company, the size of the company, the space that is available, obviously. With the county mandate being lifted, most HR departments are still requiring masks as long as you're in tight spaces, less than 6 feet. One of the hot topics right now is whether or not vaccines are going to be required for employees. And currently the overall answer seems to be no. However, a few manufacturers that I have spoken with are incentivizing it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to talk about what they're doing, but there is a way that you can encourage your employees to get vaccinated, and perhaps that has to do with mask wearing or whatever the case may be. But nobody is preventing, that I've heard, nobody is preventing anybody coming back to work if they're not vaccinated. I think that the main thing is just be smart. Be aware of the circumstances within your facility, and just try to do the right thing, keeping COVID out, and minimizing the risk.
Completely agree. And I know one other question that I've been asked, and it's somewhat of an HR question, and I know it's difficult, but and I'm curious, Rob, how much you've heard or seen of it. But a lot of folks have been working remote. They've been successful working remote, and now businesses are asking them to come back into the office, and folks are going, well, why? I've been able to do my job remote. Why do I need to come back in? How is that being handled or combated or incentivized or mandated? You've seen?
Well, yeah, I can think of two examples. In fact, there's some people on this call that I'm sure can relate to the mandate. I think it really has to do, especially in manufacturing, with a part of the culture. And to a point, whether you agree with it or not, it's fairness. How can you build something remotely? So is it fair to the people on the shop floor that have to be there as compared to office staff, sales staff, admin staff, that don't necessarily have to be? I think it also comes down to, for some people, I think it's perception, reality is perception, but in others, when you have manufacturers where the production staff really does need to work together with the sales staff, with project managers, et cetera, even though in theory, those people could work at home, that you lose that direct connection. You lose that instantaneous, hey, I need you to come out to the shop floor and look at this type of thing. And then on the other side of the coin, we know of some manufacturers that are downsizing their facilities because they have realized that the remote workforce where applicable works, and they can downsize the footprint, save money on rent, or sell their building, or whatever the case may be. And they're coming up with the best protocol to have, the people that can continue to work remotely. And then I think you have the hybrids, still allowing those that want to come back and allowing those that want to stay working remotely. So I think as time goes on, you might see a shift in that. But for right now, that seems to be what's happening.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rob. Well, unless there's any other.
Well, we had somebody chime in via the chat, and I'm not sure if everybody sees the chat, but that President Biden suggested a paid day off should be reimbursed by the federal government to incentivize vaccination compliance. I mean, I don't know if that'll happen on a national level, but it definitely can happen business by business.
Yeah, most definitely. There's definitely a lot of ways to encourage some return to normalcy. So on all aspects and all fronts. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unless anybody else has any other further questions, we'll let everyone get back to their day and to their lunch. My contact info is out there in the chat. Rob, if you want to put yours out there as well for anybody that needs to reach out to you and talk more about SAMA. Jason, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today. And anytime anybody has, any questions, I'm always open. Doors open, the phone's open. We can do a Zoom, we can do a call, we can do lunch, we can do coffee. We're here to help answer any questions we can and make sure we have all the experts together on creating an A-team for any problem resolution.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure. I'm so happy that you guys invited me to be a part of this conversation. Believe it or not, I learned some stuff by being in the presence of these two gentlemen and some of the questions that came in. So I love the engagement today, and I look forward to hopefully being invited in the future to do more of these. So
we appreciate your time.
And there, if I recall correct, there is a plan to put somewhere in the future to do a part 2 to this. And then one of us, for the participants that are on the call, one of us will be following up with the slide deck and getting those into your hands so that you can share that with others that should review it within your companies.
Yeah, we're working on a in-person part 2 here, potentially in June. So as soon as we can get details on that wrapped up, we'll get that out and advertised as well. So again, just want to work on getting everybody back together, getting the education out there, and working together as a community to solve the problems.
Okay. Awesome. Kevin and Jason, thank you both very much. We appreciate it for sure.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Rob.
Be blessed.
All right, see you.